All right, so anemia. You guys sent in a ton of stuff. Articles, studies, even like personal stories. Seems like you really want to go deep on this one.
Yeah, it's way more common than people think. And it can be really sneaky, you know? People might not even realize they have it.
Right, so to kick things off, anemia basically means your body isn't carrying enough oxygen.
Exactly.
And that all comes down to red blood cells, those tiny little cells that carry oxygen all over your body.
They're like the delivery trucks of your blood.
Oh, I like that.
And when they're not working right, well, that's when problems start.
So from what I'm seeing in all this research, there are like 3 main causes of anemia.
Yeah, that's what the sources are saying too. It's all about red blood cell production.
Okay.
Either your body's not making enough, or they're getting destroyed too quickly, or you're losing blood.
Makes sense. But then how come there are so many different types of anemia?
Well, because each of those 3 causes, they can be triggered by a bunch of different things. Let's start with production problems. Your body needs certain things to make red blood cells.
Okay.
Iron, vitamin B12, that kind of stuff. If you're not getting enough, your body can't keep up. It's like a factory running out of supplies.
Right. That's where iron deficiency anemia comes in, right?
Exactly. It's the most common type, and it's pretty much what it sounds like. Not enough iron.
Okay. But my notes, I have something here about pernicious anemia. That has to do with B12, right?
Yep. Pernicious anemia. That one's all about B12 deficiency.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. It's not always about diet.
Bro.
I mean, yeah, some people, especially vegans, they might not be getting enough B12 from food.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, it's actually about absorption. Your body needs a special protein to absorb B12, and if that's not working right, it doesn't matter how much B12 you eat.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about what you eat, but how your body uses it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've covered production problems. What about that second cause? Hemolytic anemia.
Ah, yeah. That was kind of wild. Basically, red blood cells are being destroyed faster than they can be made. It's like your own body is attacking itself.
Nice. That doesn't sound good. What causes that?
Well, sometimes it's an autoimmune disorder. Your immune system, which is supposed to protect you, starts attacking your own red blood cells.
Whoa. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. And infections, they can also cause this. Or even some medications. Some medications can make your red blood cells more fragile, so they break down easier.
Wow. Okay, so we've got production problems, destruction problems, and then there's just straight up blood loss, right?
Yeah, that one's a little more straightforward, I guess.
But I bet there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got your obvious stuff like injuries and surgery, but you can also have internal bleeding, ulcers, for example, or even heavy periods.
Right. It doesn't have to be a dramatic event. It can be something that happens gradually over time. Okay, so no matter what the cause, we end up with not enough oxygen in the blood. What does that actually do to the body?
Well, it all boils down to what we call tissue hypoxia.
Hypoxia.
Basically, it means your tissues aren't getting enough oxygen to do their job. Like imagine trying to run a marathon, but you can only breathe through a straw.
Oh, man.
That's kind of what it feels like for your body when you have anemia. You're going to be tired, weak, maybe even a little dizzy.
That explains the fatigue and shortness of breath everyone always talks about.
Exactly. But there are other effects too. Some of them are a little more subtle, like low blood osmolarity.
Osmolarity.
Yeah, it's a measure of how concentrated your blood is. Red blood cells play a big role in that. And when you have fewer of them, the osmolarity goes down, which means fluid starts leaking out of your blood and into your tissues.
So that's why people with anemia sometimes get swelling, especially in their legs and feet.
Bingo. It's all about that delicate balance in your circulatory system. And when that balance is off, your heart has to work harder too.
Right. I was just thinking about that. Because thinner blood, that's got to put more strain on your heart.
Exactly. It's called low blood viscosity. And yeah, over time, it can lead to heart problems.
So anemia is way more than just feeling tired. It can affect your whole body. And speaking of other symptoms, there's one that's, well, pretty hard to miss.
You're talking about jaundice.
Yeah, that yellowish tint to the skin and eyes.
Yeah.
Seems like that's a pretty clear sign that something's up.
Yeah, it's not always present, but it's definitely a red flag. It's caused by a buildup of bilirubin.
Bilirubin. Now, remind me again, what's bilirubin?
It's basically a waste product from broken down red blood cells. Your liver usually filters it out, but if your red blood cells are being destroyed too quickly, or if your liver isn't working right, the bilirubin can build up, and that's what causes jaundice.
So it's like a visual clue that something's wrong with your red blood cell system. Okay, so we've talked about the general causes and effects of anemia,
Yep.
but I want to dive a little deeper into a specific type that keeps coming up in these sources.
You mean sickle cell disease?
Yeah, sickle
Okay.
cell. It seems like it's a really good example of how genes can impact red blood cells.
It is. It's fascinating, really. Sickle cell is caused by a single gene mutation.
Just one tiny change in your DNA.
And that one change affects the shape of hemoglobin. That's the protein that carries oxygen inside red blood cells.
And here's the crazy part. The sources are saying that having one copy of this mutated gene actually makes you more resistant to malaria.
It's true. It's like a weird evolutionary
Yeah, it's
quirk.
like a superpower, but with a downside.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you have two copies of the mutated gene, that's when you get sickle cell disease.
And that's where things get serious.
Yeah. With two copies, your red blood cells literally change shape. They become sickle-shaped, especially when oxygen levels are low. And those sickle-shaped cells, they're stiff and sticky. They can clump together and block blood flow.
Oh, man. That sounds incredibly painful.
It is. It can cause excruciating pain. But it also leads to all sorts of other problems. Organ damage, strokes, you name it.
It's like a domino effect.
It is. And while sickle cell disease is relatively rare overall, there are certain populations where it's more common.
Right. The sources also mention another type that's prevalent in certain groups, thalassemia.
Thalassemia, yeah, that one's another genetic disorder that affects hemoglobin production.
So it's similar to sickle cell in a way.
Kind of. There are different types of thalassemia, but they all involve problems with the size or shape of red blood cells.
And I guess the symptoms are pretty similar to other types of anemia, right? Fatigue, weakness, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you'll see those classic anemia symptoms. But thalassemia can also cause things like bone deformities and an enlarged spleen.
It seems like there's a lot more to thalassemia than we can cover here.
Definitely. It's a whole other rabbit hole.
A rabbit hole we'll have to explore another time, maybe. But for now, this is a good reminder that anemia isn't just one thing. It's a whole range of disorders, each with its own unique causes and effects.
Totally. And even though it's so common, there's still so much we don't know about it.
That's what's so cool about this deep dive. The more we learn, the more we realize how much more there is to explore. So, to wrap things up, I have a question for you guys listening. Why do you think this condition that affects so many people often goes unnoticed? Something to think about as you continue your own deep dive into anemia.
That's a good one. I'm curious to hear what you all come up with.
All right, that's it for today's deep dive. We'll be back next week with a whole new topic. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.